the commercially but not critically forgotten, flawed masterpiece, Bitter Moon.
Have you ever felt real, overpowering passion?
For God's sake, man.
The story of a frustrated trust fund writer looking for idealistic love.
Have you ever truly idolized a woman?
And his lover, a young naive dancer looking to be swept off her feet.
I've been granted a glimpse of heaven.
I could listen to you forever.
Bouncing between timelines in Paris and a cruise ship destined for India via Istanbul, the pair share their tale of passion and tragedy with an English fuddy-duddy couple looking to spice up their sexually flat relationship. Welcome to Romance Wednesdays. How does Roman Polanski's polarizing movie of sexual obsession and destruction hold up? Is it a masterpiece or is it all over the place? Feel free to like and subscribe, and let's find out. In terms of the tone of the movie, it's voiceover narration.
I couldn't write, couldn't sleep.
To an extent in the style of Goodfellas, but more so I'd say Princess Bride.
I'm gonna read it to you. Small farm in the country of Florin.
It's a storytelling movie that entices the audience's curiosity. Tonally, it's slightly deceptive, as in it's got a kind of eerie feel at times, then it's a bit soapy and romantic, then it's a bit melancholic, then it's tragic to downright horrific. Tone-wise, all these different tones are used suitably, telling an unflinching, unapologetic tale of an ultimately doomed relationship, but delivered as a what you see is what you get narrative. He's just telling the story.
No more to tell.
It cuts between different tones, but all centered around the common thread of telling this story in terms of his agenda of inveigling Hugh Grant into his web of his kind of failed amour-fou relationship.
The spell was broken at last. Mimi wants you to hear the rest of our story. She thinks it'll help her chances with you.
So, casting-wise, Peter Coyote as essentially the main character, Oscar.
I'm sharing a revelation with you, damn it.
Coyote has a non-movie star believability where, yeah, he's not Michael Douglas in Basic Instinct. He's not Harrison Ford in Frantic.
You're talking about my wife.
He doesn't have movie star panache, which is to me hence why he's the best choice for this role, because you watch it and you think, who is this guy? You're not even sure if that's the bloke from E.T. or who it is. This is a real story of a failed relationship. Coyote is Oscar and Oscar is Coyote. This is not, oh yeah, Michael Douglas in the latest erotic thriller film, no.
I'm in love with you already.
Same with Emmanuelle Seigner, I believe her name is Mimi. Same thing, she's not Kim Basinger, she's not Sharon Stone, but she is the character and the character is her.
I'm sorry. I did it because I was jealous.
She really is Mimi, the young French girl looking for love.
Because I love you.
Hugh Grant, Kristen Scott Thomas, depending on when you saw this thing,
I am not most married.
you genuinely believe them as the uptight English fuddy-duddy couple
God, Nigel, I'm not a complete fool.
who are looking to jazz up their relationship and sex it up, right?
Anything you can do, I can do better.
Before she blew up with English Patient, before he blew up with Four Weddings and a Funeral, they just looked like a middle-class couple from Surrey who are sexually deprived.
Why don't you just go back for another helping and leave me in peace?
Fine.
Even if you saw it afterwards, you're like, oh, this is Hugh Grant before he was Hugh Grant. He's making more of an arse of himself. It still works.
Stupid thing to say, just slipped out.
What I'll just say to you, Vangelis sets the tone perfectly. The music is kind of melodramatic, yet it gets under your skin. On the one hand, it seems like a kind of soapy 90s B-movie romantic sexy thriller,
I'm seeing someone.
but it still conveys a message of what the movie's telling you. Let me give you another example. In Blade Runner, which is fantastic visionary cinema, right? It still also has that melodramatic music at times, soap TV feel that gets under your skin. Really well done kind of saxophone-y thing.
I want you.
For arguably one of the greatest sci-fi movies of all time, it's then got this kind of Bold and the Beautiful type music to it. but it works so brilliantly. So having Vangelis from Blade Runner, putting him in Bitter Moon, you know, the same dude who manages to have that melodramatic feel, but still he has emotionally evocative music that really helps to bring out the most of the narrative that the movie's trying to tell you. The music is so much interwoven into this movie as a major component of emotionally telling you this story. Music that encapsulates both the sweetness and the tragedy of their relationship, and I'd say overall the sweetness and the tragedy of life itself. Criticism wise, obviously this movie never became a major erotic thriller.
No.
The big thing is, it's tonally all over the place.
I'd been granted a glimpse of heaven.
God's sake, man.
You can't make up your mind whether it's kind of, I don't know, satirical black comedy or it's a thriller. And who wants to see this film because it's just about some creep who abuses his younger partner. And again, a lot of parallels get drawn with the director Roman Polanski, all his personal affairs.
He was allowed to abscond from America to lead a very luxurious life in France.
And the fact that the Mimi character is actually played by his wife. So people might watch this and just think this is this awkward, creepy movie that is kind of semi-autobiographical, when ultimately it's a story of a two-way damaged relationship.
Maybe your English isn't that good either. Maybe that's why no one wants to publish your books.
Yes, the Coyote character is a narcissistic trust fund writer who's living off daddy's money. He doesn't really have to go and get a real job, so he's trying to indulge himself with this idea and identity of being an American writer in Paris, right?
I love it here.
Come on, get a life. Paris is out.
Yeah, he's a narcissist. Yes, he meets Mimi, and he does kind of treat her like a love toy. But that's the thing, he treats her like a love toy, not just a sex toy. Whereas in 9.5 Weeks, which people still think is this iconic 80s romantic film.
There's no one to hear you if you called out.
I don't like this anymore. I want to go home.
And it is, but at the same time, I'd say 9.5 Weeks tonally is way more ambiguous and all over the place. Is it a serious psychosexual movie, or is it this glossy 80s music video thing? 9.5 Weeks gets remembered and revered as this great sexy movie from the 80s with a prime Mickey Rourke, prime Kim Basinger. But throughout the duration of the film, it's just Mickey Rourke basically being a dick to her. He's never romantic. Whereas in Bitter Moon, at the beginning, it's genuinely romantic. The fact that when they're on the carousel together and he says, "I love you" first.
I love you.
He's not running game. So the whole time Mickey Rourke's trying to run game with her, he's playing all these dumb games because he thinks if he's just open with her, she'll leave him. Whereas Coyote was just older and debonair. He was actually looking for love. Initially, he was taking Mimi out to restaurants on traditional dates. Then the relationship organically went into that let's just stay at home and have crazy sex direction.
Never going out, seeing no one but each other.
In 9.5 Weeks, Elizabeth wants more of an actual couple's relationship, but he only takes her out at the beginning to some fake mafia restaurant just to show how authentic he is.
This place has a lot of history.
Gino Beanie got his brains blown out.
Mimi actually wants to just stay at home and be addicted to this man. He has to tell her, let's mix it up and go out and about.
We need a change of scene.
That's how you know she's a few sandwiches short of a picnic.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I don't remember a scene in Bitter Moon where he forces himself onto her sexually, if you catch my meaning. But there's more of that in 9.5 Weeks. And again, in the masterpiece of Blade Runner, it happens. But in Blade Runner, if that kind of happens, it's totally contextual. But with Bitter Moon, because it's an unglamorous leading protagonist, no one wants to look at the relationship as contextual. When the relationship's dried up romantically and he just starts getting bored with her, then she's just being a brat to catch attention from him.
Do you have to drink it that way?
What's the difference? It tastes the same.
Whereas earlier on, she's pouring the milk on her boobs and it's so erotic. They get into a two-way thing.
That's great coming from a waitress.
I'm a dancer.
Dancer hell.
She throws the milk at him first. Then he hits her. I'm never going to endorse violence, but that was a two-way going at it thing, and he went too far. Whereas really, if he didn't see her as a toy, he'd try and fix the relationship or possibly end it. But people see that disturbing imagery and they start saying this is a nasty film about a creep, there's nothing in it. I'm like, no, this was a two-way toxic relationship. They were talking shit at each other because they weren't a great match outside of sex, and then spiraled out of control. Whereas in terms of two-way abuse, it's predominantly Mickey Rourke, or all Mickey Rourke in 9.5 Weeks.
John, it's only a game.
In Bitter Moon, yes, he makes her get an abortion, but he doesn't intentionally try to make her have an infection so she can't have kids anymore. She intentionally cripples him.
Easy.
Then looks after him once he's disabled, and she just abuses that whole power that she has over him. All I'm saying is the abuse was two-way the whole time.
Maybe get so little fun out of life these days.
Whereas in 9.5 Weeks, it's predominantly one-way abuse from Rourke to Basinger. But because they're the same age, they're seen as this beautiful couple and this perfect match. So much so that Mickey Rourke's got a perfect hairline and Kim Basinger's got a hairline like LeBron James. Bitter Moon's way better. But because it's a film that's a bit more unflinching, slightly less orthodox, then a lot of the British critics become as uptight and as rigid as the Hugh Grant and the Kirsten Scott Thomas couple.
Yeah, hello.
So basically my experience with Bitter Moon, I watched this movie like Mission Impossible 27 years ago on TV. And this was at a time where I was 13 going on 14, 90s teenager. I had a mad social life, I had a fat crew, but for whatever reason I was indoors on a Saturday night with the telly on. This thing comes on at the beginning. Chicks. Something about that early scene with Hugh Grant and the Mimi character, and there's Hugh Grant going, oh well, we call you frogs, and
I can always tell with frogs.
but you call us roast beef, don't you? Roast beef.
Call us roast beef, don't you? The roast beef.
That's the best part of the movie.
The roast beef.
What the fuck is this movie? And it was kind of drawing me in at a time when I thought I was cool, and I would never wanted to watch a movie on a cruise ship about a crippled old man going,
And pissed on the screen.
we had a passion you can't imagine, warm piss.
I was engulfed with this warm, golden cascade. It spattered my cheeks.
Something about that coyote depiction that kind of brought out the inner lonely man in me even then, because you feel sorry for the character who's this frustrated trust fund writer.
Like I don't have enough trouble getting published.
That's way more plausible than a kind of fantasy Mickey Rourke figure in 9.5 Weeks. He's a guy from New York in Paris living his fantasy thing,
Fortunate to find.
Ouais, monsieur.
so naive young women can believe that he's this big writer.
I could listen to you forever.
But as the movie progresses, you're like, bruv, go back to New York.
When are you gonna come back home?
You feel bad for him.
I love it here.
Watched it Saturday, then Monday he goes to school, and there was this kid who lived near me. He was like, war and piss, war and piss.
Warm, pissed.
Those of us who saw it had probably sat there and watched it beginning, middle and end, because it's just this different, unique film that you don't see every day. This was one of those movies where I've only watched it one time and I remember it vividly, because I didn't watch it again till late 2000s. Like every couple of years I have to watch it. Not too often because it's disturbing, but 3-4 years, whatever, I'm like, yo.
I experienced the orgasm of a lifetime.
God's sake, man.
So I'm making a video now because I'm like, there's not even that much good stuff on YouTube about it. I regard it as fantastic, but it is disturbing. There's only one Swedish guy who's made a video on YouTube and he's spurging out because it wasn't the film he wanted it to be. So I'm like, yo, let me just make a video now because I'll forget it otherwise, yeah? Yes, absolutely, undeniably. Allegorically, it's telling a tale of passion over purpose. It has a real cast that makes it feel more like a storytelling movie than just a Hollywood entertainment type movie.
It's not really the same thing now, is it?
It's got an alternative European quality and feel to it. Leading guy American with all this European stuff, so it's a great fusion. The other thing is it has a moral message minus the judgmental self-righteousness. Don't get too tied up in indulgent pleasure-seeking relationships.
We were just too greedy, baby.
But it just tells the story. It's not on its high horse. It might alienate certain audiences who don't want to go into it with an open mind because of the surface presentation of it.
Warm, pissed.
But essentially, it's a great piece of cinema. The voiceover thing is kind of
Wormed my way between our legs.
Goodfellas-esque.
The hardest thing for me was leaving the life.
So it's got that voiceover,
Nothing ever surpassed the rapture of that first awakening.
human storytelling component to it.
And now it's all over.
In closing, I understand why this picture never had the mainstream appeal, but I take issue with people dismissing it on the grounds that it's just a movie about a creep who just abuses a woman, when no, it's a two-way destructive relationship. It's a unique movie. Movies like this don't come along that often. Nowadays they don't come along, period. The strengths of it are the reasons why you might turn away from it, because it's disturbing. Anyone can be narcissistic or codependent. Score-wise, it's in the 8s category. I'm giving it an 8.2. If you disagree with me, however, please don't feel shy to leave a little comment underneath. You tell me about Bitter Moon, and try and remember one thing. This is Romance Wednesdays, the sexiest joint in town. If you made it to the end, like I always say, feel free to like and subscribe. I'll see you on the next one.